Praise be to God, there is no other God except God. Are there aliens out there? Is there life in other planets? According to the scientists, they still don't know. Eventually, they will be able to correctly guess scientifically before the end of the world, but what's the point then, when the world will end anyway? Now, we as believers, if we are careful and not biased, we can actually attain this knowledge beforehand. And once they eventually find the answer just before the end of the world, this will show to them that I knew what I was talking about. We can know this before scientists because we have the Quran. But the condition is that we have to use the whole Quran open-mindedly, and not only a few verses of the Quran. There are two ways we can get to this answer. We can assume that there are no aliens out there, and then gradually adjust that assumption wherever new information from the Quran goes against that assumption. Or two, we can initially assume that there are aliens out there and gradually adjust that assumption wherever it contradicts the Quran. Now let me use the second approach and reach the answer together with you. So let's initially assume that there are aliens out there. Let's start from that. Then in verse 24-45, God tells us that He created every moving creature from water. So this excludes the possibility that there are moving creatures out there who are not made of water. So far we can conclude that if there are aliens out there, they must be water-based organisms, not made of iron like transformers, but creatures which are more similar to us. Now let's estimate how many planets in the universe would potentially be suitable for water-based organisms. It is estimated that in total, this universe contains about 10 million planets, a number with 26 digits. But how many of them are potentially suitable for water-based organisms? Well, for a planet to be suitable for the creation of water-based organisms, first it has to be not to be too far from its star, so that water does not freeze, and not too close to its star, so that water does not evaporate, just at the right distance from the star. And this is called the Goldilocks zone. It is estimated that 1 in every 2,000 planets in the universe are within the Goldilocks zone. The second criterion is that it should be at the usual temperature between 0 and 100 degrees Celsius. And just being on the Goldilocks zone does not guarantee this, because the planet can have excessive or insufficient internal heat from its core, or the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And the chances that a Goldilocks zone planet also has the appropriate surface temperature are about 1 in 100. It also has to be at the size which is not too different from that of the Earth, because a bigger size would destroy life with large weather events, and so on. And then a small planet would barely be able to hold the atmosphere. 1 in about every 100 planets is close to the size of the Earth. Of course, such planet would need to have an ozone layer to protect from radiation whatever life is created in there. Radiation destroys the DNA molecules, and every 1 in about 1,000 planets has some kind of protective atmospheric layer. Of course, it also needs a magnetosphere for such a protection, and 1 in about every 10 planets has a relatively good magnetosphere. And the planet has to have the appropriate amount of carbon on the surface. Carbon is the building blocks of organisms. The difference between organic and inorganic chemistry is whether it has carbon or not. Because carbon can connect in so many ways with itself, and most of the atoms in the universe, then it's like the Lego brick of atoms, which I believe is the only atom with sufficient different connections to enable replicable organisms. The Quran calls it black mud, because it is the only chemical element which is black. Now, 1 in about 100 planets has sufficient carbon spread on the surface. Another thing which would be needed in a planet to support water-based organisms is lightning, to catalyze the initial organic molecules. This is proven by the Miller-Urey experiment, which is taught in high school. You need lightning to create the initial organic molecules from the non-organic molecules. A lot of religious people imagine God creating life in some kind of weird way, like a magician. How about He just says it in heaven, and lightning strikes the carbonated water on earth? Understanding it scientifically does not exclude God's involvement. Anyway, about 1 in every 100 planets has the appropriate lightning in it. And finally, to support the creation of water-based organisms, the planet must have, of course, water. About 1 in every 100 planets has water. But that's mostly underground water, or just small pieces of ice in the poles of the planet or something, which did not evaporate and leave the planet. But the planet has to have proper bodies of water on the surface of the planet, where the light hits it for the needed photosynthesis. So actually proper seas or lakes or oceans are needed. And from all the planets with water, planets with proper seas are much rarer. Maybe about 1 in every 1,000 such planets. So now I just told you the conditions which a planet has to fulfill to be suitable for the creation of water-based organisms. And I also told you the probabilities for each of those conditions. And the probability that you will find a planet which fulfills all those conditions at once, if you just multiply those numbers, you get the probability, which is 1 in 200 quintillion, which is a number with 20 zeros. Luckily, the number of planets in the universe is 5,000 times larger than that. This means that in our whole universe, there are only 5,000 planets which fulfill all the conditions for the creation of water-based organisms. And the Quran tells us that only water-based organisms exist in this world. So from all the billion planets in our universe, there are only about 5,000 planets suitable for water-based organisms. But that does not automatically mean that those planets will lead to such organisms. Those conditions have to be arranged in a very specific order, with billions and billions of trials across many billions of years, to statistically get a chance to have the simplest form of an organism which has about 200,000 letters in its DNA. You could not have a DNA which is way more simple than that, because then it would not be able to replicate. And you cannot have it more complicated because it just wouldn't happen in those planets. The probabilities are enormously low that such an organism would pop up by chance, because each of those letters has to be in that specific order. However, there are 5,000 planets with billions and billions of carbon and water molecules, with billions and billions of seconds available in them. They have time. Planets have time. No one is waiting for them. And this is the part which scientists don't know yet. They don't know exactly how much time is needed for such an event to occur. So I'm just going to take a guess. Let's say that 1 in over, let's say, 1,000 of those habitable planets who existed for about 1 billion years, such a spark would happen and give rise to a water-based organism. This means that from about 1 septillion planets in our universe, which is an enormously huge number, only 5,000 of them have the conditions for organisms, and only about 5 to 10 of those planets, statistically, actually should have organisms in them. So this is the statistical conclusion. Statistically, anywhere from 5 to 10 planets should have organisms in them. Now, using the Quran, we can know even more details. How many planets exactly, and what kind of organisms exist over there. And we can find all this from the Quran. Here is the evidence. According to the Quran, only animals and humans are considered life on earth, but not plants. Plants don't have souls, but animals and humans have souls. In the Bible, it says that blood is the seat of life, and plants don't have blood. Animals and humans have blood and a soul, so Quranically, animals are alive, but trees are not life. So according to the Quran, a tree has more in common with a stone than with a dog. I mean, the modern scientific definition classifies the trees as a living thing, but not according to the Quran. According to the Quran, a dog is a living creature, while the tree and the stone are not living creatures. So according to the Quran, a dog lives on earth, but a tree is part of the earth, which is why verse 22:63 says that God turns the earth green, which means that grass, as a plant, is considered part of the earth, not a living creature on earth, but earth changing shape and color, becoming grass. And there are many other verses in the Quran which support the idea that plants are not living creatures. Now, to merge the scientific and Quranic definition of life, we should use the word sentient organisms. Sentient means something which feels. Animals have feelings, but trees don't have feelings. And this has to do with the soul, but now you know the distinction. Only what scientists call sentient beings are what the Quran calls living beings. Now, all living beings, or so-called sentient beings, according to scientists, have positive reinforcement senses or feelings and negative repelling senses or feelings. Now, God tells us in the Quran that He is not unjust to any soul. This means that no soul would ever experience a negative feeling unless he deserves it. And no soul would deserve it unless he became part of Satan's trial. And in the Quran, God tells us that only earth was given to Satan as a trial. In verse 2:30. Not the other planets. This means that since negative feelings can be experienced by God's creatures only on earth, and all animals and humans have negative feelings, that means that there must be animals and human beings only on earth. But this does not exclude the possibility that there are plants on other planets. And we already calculated it statistically that there most likely are organisms, therefore only plants, in about 5 to 10 planets in our universe. In fact, the Quran tells us exactly that there are 7 planets in the whole universe which have plants in them. Verse 65:12 says that God created 7 universes and the same number of Earths like it. Now, had those 6 other planets not been with plants, they would not be like Earth. But in the Arabic Quran, it says like the Earth. And because the Arabic Quran considers plants to be part of the Earth, it means that those 6 other planets must contain plants to be considered like the Earth. And they also have all the other things like the Earth, rivers and seas and an atmosphere and mountains, but not animals and humans. So technically, if we use the Quranic definition of life, there is no life in other planets in the universe. But if we use the scientific definition of life, then yes, there is life in 6 other planets, but only plants, without animals or humans, or things which resemble them. The question is, why so? Well, the purpose is to show that God started the creation at least 3 times from scratch. On earth, he created animals from scratch, separately from the plants, and then they evolved. And then finally, he created the humans separately from scratch, from earth. So because in other planets, plants never evolved into animals, but only into other plants, this will prove on the day of judgment that God was involved to separately create the animals on earth. So Darwinian evolution can be considered as partly true. The dog and the tiger are distant cousins from a common, very distant ancestor, but the trees and the dogs are not cousins. They have separate ancestors. So there are at least 3 evolutionary trees on earth, and not just one as Darwin thought. Also, humans and animals are not cousins. So plants were created separately, and then they evolved into many different plants. And land animals were created separately, and they evolved into many different animals. And in the end, humans were created separately, but they did not evolve, because the humans were created in a perfect shape. They only devolved a tiny bit by getting mixed with Neanderthals and their cousins. But anyway, I'll talk in another video in more detail about evolution and creation, God willing. But here is my prediction among thousands of predictions which I make. I predict that in those 6 other planets, roses have no thorns, if they exist at all. Thorns are mechanisms which evolved in plants to protect them from the animals, but there are no animals in those 6 other planets. So those plants evolved more peacefully, without the need for thorns. So the conclusion is that there are no aliens in other planets in this universe, except plants. And those plants exist in exactly 6 other planets. Someone might say, but what about those media reports of people seeing UFOs? Well, most of those claims are made by people who were on drugs at that time. A few of those claims are made by narcissists who want attention, and this can be noticed because whenever a popular movie with UFOs comes out, the number of people who claim to have seen UFOs increases because they get motivated by the movie to become famous and things like that. And there are also rare cases of people who truly see something in the sky, but those are either some kind of weather phenomena or more likely secret weapons tested by governments. For example, Russia might want to develop a new secret military airplane which is not detected by US radar, but they don't know how good is the US military radar detection. So they will send a spy to the US to test it. He will fly a drone with a similar stealth capabilities to the potential airplane prototype, and he will mask it in some kind of unrecognizable shape so that people don't know for sure what they saw. The purpose would be to fly it and see if the US military will detect it. If they don't, then Russia knows that they should go ahead to build the airplane with similar stealth capabilities and things like that. So most of these cases are just militaries testing one another's capabilities and things like that. And then someone might, while hiking, might see it and tell the media, and the media will label it as a UFO, which simply means an unidentified flying object. It doesn't mean that aliens visited us. It just means that the media were not able to identify what it was that the person claimed to see. But it wasn't aliens, because aliens don't exist, except for plants, and of course the angels and the demons, jinns, they exist in other dimensions outside of this universe. But no one who has lived after Muhammad has ever seen an angel or a demon while still being alive. But that's another issue, which I can prove with other verses of the Quran.